What is happening, guitar playing people? We've got another excellent weekly lesson for you all. As always, this is going to be super beneficial for any and all of you who are kind of hitting that sticky point, that plateau phase. Things aren't improving the way you want them to. Some of the songs you're working on aren't, going exactly where you want them to go, yada, 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 et cetera, et cetera. You know what I'm talking about. These are really simple exercises and drills that are also really applicable to your playing. So for me, more fun than your traditional, bone dry arpeggios, major scales, things like that. Really important. They'll pop up from time to time, but I like to focus on things that incorporate those concepts and those textures, but are just a little bit more fun and therefore a little bit more applicable to your playing and doesn't make practice, such a slugfest. So anyways, I'm looking down just because that's where my, tabs and notes and the actual exercises are. We've got a few, we've got an exercise that's for some nice chord shapes that are really important, again, just to get, feel and touch going. We've got an exercise for speed, and same thing. There's skill and touch in all of these, but speed focus. And then you got a triad exercise. Always important to get some triads in the mix. And one of my favorite ways to kind of play around with triad shapes. And then we've got a lick that's going to help with your soloing, your improvisational skills, your lead guitar skills. And then that'll be it. So I always recommend, 20 minutes or, take the exercise or the session. Sometimes it's 15 minutes, but hit this for the allotted time before your guitar sessions throughout the week. And of course, every week we've got a new, session for you. So, if you're playing Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, hit this before your session. Each exercise is timed so you can adjust the timing and all that stuff. All right. If you do find it helpful, like and subscribe. Very helpful for me. I won't petition you to do that anymore. And with that, let's get into the first exercise, which is seventh chords. And we're using the D through the high E strings to create these shapes. And we're just going to run through the major scale using these chords. All right. So every chord inside of this key, we're just going to be hitting those all on this string set, and really just to get things going. Let's all take a deep breath together. I always tell people, I feel like I can get so tense because I'm talking to the, camera, my little cell phone, but let's be loose. So the first shape is a C major 7. Always nice to hit things in the key of C because there's no sharps or flats. So, a little less confusing. Of course, once you have the, the kind of rule of the major scale and all the different keys under your belt, this is really easy to move around to different keys, but C is just helpful. So there's C major 7. And if you think about that kind of, D shape, right? All we're doing is we're taking the 1, the root note, and we're bringing down to the 7th note in the scale. So that's why it is a 7th chord. All right. So we have the 1, the 3, the 5, and the 7. So we're starting with C major 7. All right. And then we're going to go D minor 7 because in the major scale, we've got major, minor, minor, major. If we're really simplifying it, we're going major, minor, minor, major, major, but we're doing 7th chords. So it's major, minor, minor, major, dominant, minor, diminished, back to major, back to the root. All right. So C major 7, we've got that. And then we're going to go D minor 7. Major, minor. What's the next? Minor. So we've got to go E minor 7. And again, no sharps or flats. C, D, E. And now we're barring this differently. All right. So I've got this index bar. I've got middle ring on the top 2 strings. And then I've got pinky here on the G string. So it might be funky for some of you. A-okay, take your time. This doesn't need to be with a metronome right away. 5-minute timer for each of these. Work through it to the extent that you're able to, and then move on. All right, so we got C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7. Now we're going back to major, and that's just a half step up. So F major 7, right? No sharps or flats. So C, D, E, F, F major 7. And if you were following along at the beginning, then we're going to go to a dominant chord, G dominant 7 or G7. And really quick, again, just for some theory, constructs for all of you, if we take that G shape, traditional major, so think about the D shape down here. If we move that up here, it's a G. Like I said earlier, if we take this root note and we move it down, there's the 7, right? The 7th note in the major scale. If we flat that, it's a minor 7. Now with the other minor chords, we also flat the 3rd. And that's how we get this tone. With the dominant 7 shape, we don't do that with the 3rd note, right? The 3rd note in the scale, the 3. We keep that major. So that's why it has that unique tone, that unique texture. And when you're playing like blues, dominant blues, that's why sometimes you can, go between major and minor textures as you're playing, right? It has both of those elements. All right, so G7. Then we're going to move back to minor. So again, C, D, E, F, G, A minor 7. All right. And then we're going to go with a diminished chord. That's the 7th, 7th chord in the key is going to be diminished. And that's B diminished. All right. And then back to C. C major 7. Now, when you do feel comfortable with this, I would recommend going through the scale, or through the key, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, A, B, and then back to C. So C, D, E, F, G, A, B, back to C. Sorry for the brain fart. My dog was over here grooming herself. And then you can come back down. So C, B, A, G, F, E, D, C. All right. If you're feeling comfortable enough to hit that with the metronome, please do. Really important to always be hammering rhythm, right? Especially if you want to go play with others and jam and all that stuff. Super important. But if you're not there yet, you're more in the beginner stages, just work through the shapes as you see fit. Make sure they're ringing out clearly. Take your time coming down to this shape. Make sure it's ringing out clearly. Come back to this shape or come up to this shape. Could be a little funkier. Make sure that's ringing out clearly, and on and on and on. 5-minute timer, done and dusted. So there it is. There's exercise 1. Thanks for bearing with me again. The brain fart, I will blame it on my small dog, who is being a little distracting over here. Okay, let's move on to the second exercise. So we're going to be chasing some speed here, and it's really just focused on alternate picking. And again, making sure we're getting relaxed and really so that we can be fluid, right? If you really want to go fast, you need to be fluid, you need to be relaxed. You cannot be tensed up on this instrument if you're trying to go fast. You're going to be choking, and that's going to make it harder to move fluidly around the neck and just, move your fretting hand, move your picking hand. So all we're going to do is we're going to go 1, 2, 3, and once we get to the 4th note, we're going to double up because that forces us to alternate our pick from string to string. Right? So down, up, down, and then I have to go to up, down, up, down, up. All right, so I have to alternate from string to string. Once I go through that, once I go through all 6 strings, I'm going to inch up, half step up, and then I'll come back down. And if you're noticing, I'm trying my best to play light, so I'm sorry if it comes down a little bit, a little harder to hear. But if you really, again, want to play fast, you'll need to be light and relaxed. And as you continue through, just inch up 1 fret at a time, just as I was doing there. But if you're trying to speed up, starting a little slower, speeding up, you need to stay light, you need to stay relaxed. Okay, so what you can do from session to session is you can maybe start, just for example, start at 65 BPM, play through that. If it feels great and you don't make any mistakes, no hiccups, in the same session, you can bump it up, right? Bump it up to 70. If that feels great and you're able to get through everything, no mistakes for, let's say 4 frets, bump it up again. You want to toe that line, so right where you are maybe starting to see some blemishes, back off a little bit. You want it to be really clear, but of course you want to be pushing yourself a bit and making it challenging enough where you really have to focus on staying light and fluid. So just keep that in mind, but that can be inside of one session or it can be session to session. So day 1, maybe you're just going 80 BPM. Day 2, maybe you bump it up to 82. It doesn't have to be huge increments. Maybe you are able to go up to 85, maybe even 90, now that you're feeling comfortable with it. All right, but you can go inside of the session or from session to session. And either way is all good. But let's say you just creep up 5 BPM each section. If you play 5 days a week and you practice 5 days, you start at 80, you go to 85, 90, 95, you end with 100. That's a huge increase inside of 1 week. So just keep that in mind. And again, if you need to cut these back to 3 minutes, that's okay. I think 5 is optimal per exercise. Gets you in great reps without overdoing it. But if you do need to cut things back a little bit, the 3 minutes per exercise, it's going to be a 12-minute session. And I think that's really, really attainable. All right. So there's the alternate picking exercise. So far we have 7th chords from D, right? The 4, 3, 2, 1 string set. And then we have alternate picking. Now we're, picking up some speed. We're connecting chords and, individual notes. We're going to go back to chords and we're going to go scale approach again, but these are going to be triads. And as I'm going through this, I'll try my best to explain why they're so freaking important. I'll try not to go overboard, but I do think it's helpful for a lot of people. So let's, as I was just saying about the last exercise, let's toe the line with, explaining, but not overdoing it. We're doing this in the key of G. So gospel chords, we're going to run up the scale. We're going to run up the scale using chords, using triads. And we're just going to use G and A minor. So the 1 and the 2. So here's G. And if we were going to flat the 3rd here, it would be a minor chord. So G, same shape, but now we're moving it up. So it's an A minor, right? So if this was G major and we flatted the 3rd, this would be G minor, G major, A minor. So it's the kind of like the minor counterpart for that shape. All right. And same thing, 1, 2. So that's going to be the, high E of the next chord, which would be G as well, right? We're just sticking with G and A minor with the exception of the 7th note, but we'll wait till we get there. G. And so what would be the minor counterpart here, right? 5, 1, 3, flat the 3rd, right? There's the minor shape. We'll move that up. So now, so far we got, right? Think about that bottom or the, the top, the high E has kind of the leading note. You can hear the scale happening already. All right, then we're moving back to G. And think about this as that cage system. It's okay if you're not familiar with that. Think about our A shape. What would be the top 3 strings of our A shape? And if we moved it up, there it is. Just playing the G. All right, so that's kind of the whole deal with triads is you're taking these standard chord shapes, but you're breaking them into their most basic parts. And now you can really map out the neck, right? If you know that this is G and this is G and this is G, I can actually use that to help me get some lead lines and have a good map of the neck. All right, back to A minor. Then we're going F sharp diminished. I'm still thinking about the 7th chords. F sharp diminished, and then back to G, right? Octave, 1 octave up. So, you can associate, think about gospel chords, think about that tone. You can play around there a little bit. what I would do first is go up the scale. And then come back down. Get that under your fingers first. Again, you might need to go no metronome to start. All right. Add the metronome. Once you feel comfortable inside of metronome being rhythmic, that's where you can take the metronome away again, and maybe you just play around with, a little bit of your own. Something like that. Again, what's nice about this is once you got things under your fingers, you can get a little creative with it. And, once you have something that you like, right, let's say you enjoy that, you like how that sounds, then just clean it up. And now you can kind of transition your practice over the course of a few days. Once you get familiar with this, you can then transition to something a little more creative that you made up yourself and refine that and make it cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. And then you can add the metronome and start refining that faster and faster as well. Right, and then you can kind of use that as your drill if you feel comfortable with that. Otherwise, just move through the scale. All right, I'm just giving you some options for those of you who are maybe a little bit earlier in your guitar journey and those of you who are a little further along. All right, because getting creative is an important part of this instrument. Now, exercise 4 is geared towards lead guitar, will help you with your soloing, your improvisational skills, and we're going to be focusing on raking, which simply put, raking is just muting a few strings on the way up. Right? Think about raking up and then, hitting those so they make a little noise, but they're not ringing out. And that's going to be on the front end of the actual note you're hitting. All right, excuse the guitar face. I feel like they're way too present sometimes. All right, so there's raking, and here's the lick that we're going to be working on. Repetitive, 5 minutes. Bring it down to 3 or 4 if you need to, but 5 minutes of just working through this with a metronome, or you can put on, something like an A blues backing track, minor or dominant. All right. So there's the lick. That's what we're going to be using as the exercise, as our final exercise. Repetitive for 5 minutes, right? So that we can really dial in that raking technique. And then, next week and the week after, we'll have different lead guitar skills and techniques to work on. So after a while, you will become a nice, well-rounded player because you're going to be working on, a certain skill in a focused way for, a week, then a different skill for another week, et cetera, et cetera. So let's just quickly break this down into basically 3-ish, 4-ish parts. So that first part would just be muting the high E and the B string, hitting the G string and hammering. Play that a little bit cleaner, although this is meant to be kind of swampy, a little dirty, in my opinion, this kind of tone, this texture. Again, it's okay if you're hearing a little bit of that D string because you're going to be moving through this afterwards. You're not really going to let that ring out. But if you do need to break this into parts, that might happen. So muting the high E, the B, and then hammering on the G string from 5 to 7. So let's call that part 1. Part 2, we would be raking on the high E and the B again, hitting the 5 again, and then coming down on the 7th fret of the D string. Take it slow if you need to, kind of a soft bar on the high E and the B, but we do have our, index finger pressed onto the G string of the 5th fret. Right, hear it out, sound it out. All right, so there's, second section. Then we got this, third section where we're raking now on the high E, the B, and the G string. And if you want to kind of consider that final little note part of that third section. I do 2 downstrokes on that, those final notes on the 7th fret of the D string. So I can lead right into that rake up. So here we go. Down, down, up. Again, excuse the guitar faces, just hearing out, sounding out for myself. And play it with a metronome, play it with a backing track, whatever you like. Like I said, an A minor blues or an A dominant. Usually it's just, they'll just be called an A blues, and you can play it like that. But if you play with a metronome, you can obviously pick up the speed maybe more elegantly or easier, really, because you're not relying on a specific backing track that might just be stuck in 70, 80 BPM. You can pick this up and get faster and faster. So there's the deal. There's the whole practice session. I appreciate you all for stopping by. 5 minutes a session. Like and subscribe if you found it helpful. And with that, I will see you all on next week's session.